Welcome to another DragonLance Saga episode. It is Kirinor Gildember VI. My name is Adam, and today I'm going to give you my review of Tales of Ravenloft. Now, this is going to be a spoiler review, so if you don't want to hear about the stories, you don't want to know the spoilers, turn off this feed, go read the collection, and come back. Now, you may also be asking yourself, and rightfully so, why is a DragonLance channel reviewing a Ravenloft anthology? It's actually a really good point. I was just going to review the story itself, which is about Sithicus, which is the domain of Lord Soth, who's a Dragonlance character pulled into Ravenloft. But I thought if I'm just going to read the one story in a whole collection, I'm kind of doing a bit of a disservice to the collection. I might as well at least read all of them. And honestly, it's Halloween. So who doesn't love a good horror story in Halloween time, right? The entire month of October for me is Halloween, just so you know. Of course, I don't always go knocking on people's doors asking for candy, but when I do, it's always in October. It'd be a little weird, a grown adult doing that, though. Anyway, I'm not going to judge you if that's what you do. I'd like to take a moment and thank my collaborating patrons, the Heroes of the Lance, and invite you to consider becoming a patron or member of this channel by using the links in the description below. You can even pick up Dragonlance gaming materials using my affiliate link that's down there as well. All of these support the channel and allow me to continue picking up source materials to continue putting out these videos, which it's a lot of fun for me, and I hope you enjoy them as well. Of course, we have a live chat here for those joining live, and if you want to throw in any comments or thoughts about the collection or Ravenloft or Lord Soth or hell, Dragonlance in general, put them in there, and as soon as I'm done reading the review, I will get to them, and we can just wax a little bit back and forth, you know, have a little bit of fun. It's Wednesday. Let's have a good hump day, okay? I've written out brief synopses of each of the stories. There's actually quite a number of stories in this collection. So I'm going to start with the Dragonlance one, the Lord Soth one. It's called The Rigor of the Game. I'll start with that story, even though it's out of order. So for those of you who don't want to stick around for the Ravenloft specific stuff and only want to hear the Dragonlance tangentially related story, we'll front load that so you can get out of here if you don't want to sit through the other ones. And again, I totally get it if you don't. I don't blame you at all. And this is not going to be a normal thing. The next book I'm going to be covering is Spectre of the Black Rose, which is the last of the Lord Soth novels that I'm going to be, well, that exist, one, but also that are not set in Krynn. So let's dive into it, shall we? Let's do this. All right, let me find the story. Again, there are a lot of stories, so I might be here for a bit. The Rigor of the Game by James Lowder. Now, this is a story about a gambler named Oliver Arkwright. He's traveling to Sithicus because he heard about a high-stakes game. I want to put a pin in this really quick because it seems like at any time, anyone who wants to travel to a different domain in Ravenloft can do so at their whim, unless they need to travel to a different domain in order to save their life or avenge themselves or, you know, anything other than a slight whim. They can't seem to find the mists. But any other time, it's not a problem at all. I don't get it. What's the... Anyway, all right. So anyway, he's traveling to Sithicus because he heard about this high-stakes gambling game, and he is an accomplished gambler. When he arrived at the Iron Warden Inn, he realized that the game is being run by a murderous gambler he has crossed paths with in Rishmetal named Tisiphone. She and her bodyguard Unther are owners of the Iron Warden. Now, as the game begins, Tisiphone explains the house rules. In the game that they're playing, it's called Death's Head Dice. It's a variation of craps. The ones on the dice are the Death's Head skull icons, and they still count for one each time you roll them. If you roll two of those Death's Head, or double skulls, it's called Double Death's Head. And you immediately lose all of the money that you brought to gamble with. Immediately. A little harsh, I know. Now, the other house rule is that if a shooter rolls a 7 or 11, the house gets a chance to kill it with a roll. If they roll Double Death's Head, you win double the pot that you had originally won individually with the 7 or 11. Now, all players eventually lose to the house, or Oliver, and Oliver places his bet as Tisiphone seems to want to shut down the house at Lord Soth's orders, like there's a curfew or something. Oliver nearly loses the roll, but ends up winning. Tisiphone cannot cover the bet and ends up handing over the deed to the Iron Warden. Now, as Tisiphone and Unther are leaving, Lord Soth and Azrael walk in. Lord Soth wants to play the house for the new warden to lead his skeletal troops against the torturous elves that roam Sithicus. It is here that Oliver realized that he was played by Tisiphone. She wanted to lose so that she wouldn't have to be the warden. Soth rolls double Death's Head and loses to the house. Seemingly intentionally, but it's Lord Soth, so who knows. But Oliver rolls 7 to win. Soth tries to roll to beat him, but Oliver claims that there's a new house rule that does not allow him to do that. Azrael leaps across the table in were-badger form to pretty much just kill Oliver, as Soth smacks Azrael right out of the air, saying that he respects the house rule, then gives the warden chain to Tisiphone and Unther, who are standing terrified right next door, right next to Lord Soth. Lord Soth tells Oliver that he cannot leave and will return it, leave the inn, the ownership, and he's going to leave, he'll return in weeks to a month in order to play him again for the same position of warden over his militia, as the wardens usually don't live long, and he doesn't expect Tisiphone and Unther to live much more than a month anyway. So I thought this story was really great. It all just centers around this really simplified gambling rule of, you're going to go in, you're going to play a game, you think you're winning, but the house wanted to lose in the first place, thereby playing you. They try to get out before Lord Soth comes, because apparently he comes at the same time anyway, every time that he does show up, and they're just a fraction of a second too late. And they end up getting burned anyway by Lord Soth due to the quick wits of Oliver Arkwright. That's the entirety of the story. It didn't have a whole lot to do with Lord Soth, except to set up that, because we got to keep in mind that this was not written when this story came out. So the only other Lord Soth story we have in Ravenloft was Knight of the Black Rose, which did not talk about Sithicus at all. There's a couple paragraphs at the very end of the story, but that was it. So unless you played the role-playing game in 2nd edition, you would have no idea that there were bands of roaming feral elves out there assaulting villagers and random passers-by. You would have no idea that Lord Soth has an army that regularly goes out and tries to rout the wicked elves. And you would have no idea that he then has to return to this inn on a regular basis to replenish the warden to lead his troops. It's just this nice little bit of color for Sithicus and for Lord Soth's character that outside of this short story you would never get until this, which is fantastic, because the very first chapter of this actually talks about the Iron Warden Inn. It leads you into this whole gambling for the wardenship. It's great. I just love it. And if I didn't read this short story, I would not have fully understood the gravity of the inn and the game. So it's a fantastic short story. I left out a lot of details and minutiae of thought and experience and stuff like that. It's actually really good. It's really worth a read. If you have an opportunity, I highly recommend picking it up. You can get them $3 or something used. I got my copy really, really inexpensively. And it came new. There was no creases, no folds, nothing in the binding. It was just a pristine copy for $3. So totally worth $3 for that story alone, in my opinion. Okay, so that is the only story that deals with Sithicus or Lord Soth. So if you don't want to sit through the rest of these Ravenloft stories, I dig it. I appreciate it. I understand it. But I'm going to continue from the very beginning, and we're just going to roll through these as, relatively quickly as possible. But I do want to give a couple thoughts about different ones, because again, as with any anthology, some of these are better than others, and some of them, on just the merits of a horror story, are really terrible, and there's a couple really, really good gems in here. So we're going to start with The Crucible of Dr. Rudolph van Richten. And this is by David Weiss. This is a story about Dr. Rudolph van Richten searching for his son who was abducted by a Vistani. Vistani are the gypsies that roam the realms in Ravenloft, or domains as they call them. He's an herbalist who was visited by the Vistani to assist their elder's son. He failed at assisting him, and the son died. The Vistani blamed him and said that and he said that they could have anything of value that he had in return for that failure. When he woke the next day, his son was gone. So he strapped the dead Vistani to his horse and set off after them to rescue his son when he was attacked by constructs and nearly by zombies and ghouls when Lord Azalin contacted him through the zombies. Now, I don't know enough about each of those domains to give any context or color to Lord Azalin or anything like that. So, and honestly, most of these stories don't give you that either. So it's relying on you to have played the first edition or second edition role-playing campaign setting, or just pick up contextual clues along the way, which is what I did, but it still sort of leaves a little bit to the imagination. Van Richten explains what he's doing, and Azalin decides to help him, as he hates the Vistani of Barovia and how they travel the mists into his realm of Darkon. He gives undead life... he gives the undead... My writing on this, I should have read this again, and sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. Anyway, he gives life to the dead Vistani as a sort of zombie in order for the Vistani to lead them to the original Vistani's camp so that he can then find his son and again, exact a little revenge in Barovia and assaults it, demanding for his son. The Vistani there tell him that they sold his son to Baron Metis, who is a vampire. She curses Van Richten to be surrounded by monsters for eternity, and he curses them in return, unleashing the zombie horde upon them, destroying them all. He gets a little case of conscience during this massacre and tries to stop the zombies. Then he realizes what he's doing, but it's too late. So he went to go get his son, but he was turned into a vampire, and Van Richten killed him. Furious, Metis traveled to Darkon and killed Van Richten's wife in retaliation. And now Van Richten is searching for Metis for revenge. Now, Van Richten sounds very familiar. I think he's the guy that they always reference as doing like the monster lists and stuff. So I guess this is like an origin story for him. I don't know. It was an okay story. It left a lot to be enjoyed, to be quite honest. I like a good zombie story, but this felt very much like, hey, this is Ravenloft, and these are all the different types of monsters you're going to encounter in Ravenloft. That's the vibe I got from this short story, and it just wasn't worth it. I like the twist that he goes and hunts down his son, and it turns out the Vistani sold him into slavery to a vampire who then turned his son into a vampire. And the twist of fate that he has to then kill his own son, but it doesn't go into that in detail at all. The entirety of the story is him finding out that Metis has his son, and then there's like a paragraph wrapping the whole thing up, which is just not enough, because I think the real story of this is him having to face his own son and how murdering his son is actually the best thing that you could do as a father in that situation, which is a nightmare. But they don't address that at all. So I feel like it was a lost cause. Here's a bunch of supplements for Ravenloft. Charlotte says, thank you so much for tuning in live. I appreciate you. They even use his name for the new one. That's where I thought I heard it from. Okay, so I'm clearly not a Ravenloft guy, even though I did play it a lot. I just didn't buy all the supplements. You enjoyed the Ravenloft module when you played AD&D. The tales are fun. Kind of reminded you of Tales from the Crypt. Yeah, it kind of does. I think a lot of anthologies do in general, but specifically Ravenloft novels because they're all horror-based. And by the way, if you're not watching the Tales of the Crypt series on AMC or Shudder, you're missing out. It's great. Van Richten was the Van Helsing of Ravenloft. Okay. I tried to give it in the story, but everything you needed for the character was in the module instructions. Gotcha. Okay. So the next story is called The Vanished Ones by Chet Williamson. Thanks for joining live, Commander Bond. I appreciate you, man. So The Vanished Ones begins with Ivan Dragonov explaining how he got infected by lycanthropy. He destroys evil, and even as a werebeast, he continues, though isolated and alone. He traveled to Dementliu, I hope I'm saying these domains right, or towns, and entered a tavern. Eventually, he began chatting with soldiers about the missing townsfolk, even one of the soldiers' brothers, when Gabriella Fuhr walked in, a red-headed bombshell. Her husband went missing and began sharing stories of with Ivan. She asked him out for dinner, and when there, she asked him to take her into his arms. He's overcome with lust and turns into the beast. But by then, she's already turned into a giant black widow. She had lured him there to drain him of his life force. He fought her and eventually killed her. He saw the soldier watching and confronted him, explaining everything. They find the drained corpse, and in the bottom of the well, they find Gabriella's husband's corpse, which burst from the baby spiders within it. Ivan kills them all and leaves. He decides to try and find a cure for his lycanthropy. Really interesting switch. He thought he, had to... There's a lot of that, though. I mean, this sort of Black Widow luring in the man, I feel like that would be known really quickly. Like, hey, anyone that goes home with her, they don't come back, So if she's like a regular of this town, of this tavern, and she just walks in again, all the soldiers that Ivan is talking to should be like, dude, don't. I know she's hot, but trust me. Right? They gotta look out for one another. No one says anything. They just no, people just disappear with her, and that's okay. I mean, to be fair, they didn't know it was her, but I feel like after the first couple, you could point a finger. The Puritans did it without any evidence. Why can't these guys do it? That's all I'm saying. So, I don't know. The story was okay. I like the twist that she was actually the one luring him to kill him, not to, I don't know, make a love. But, I don't know. And why wouldn't you like being a werewolf? That's like, there's a lot of people who are just really into vampires and goth and stuff like that. Mine is werewolf. I love beasts. Ugh, I love the idea of transforming into a werewolf, and I love werewolf films. They're fantastic. Xylox, thanks for joining live, man. Good to see you. You actually made it to a live stream. You haven't read this book. If you don't want spoilers, tune out. I don't want you to, but it's best for you if you're going to read it. You could see that, but maybe she takes faces or looks like someone's ideal woman each time slightly different. That's interesting, Jacob. I mean, she is originally a huge, gigantic Black Widow. So if she's shape-changing into this voluptuous redhead, why couldn't she shape-change into something different, So you got a good point there. And the point that Charlotte just nailed home before I did. So you're absolutely right. All right, so let's do this next one. This is called The House... Oh, this is kind of an interesting one. The House of 100 Windows by Mark Anthony. So this is about Clarice Harrowing, who's the daughter of a wealthy merchant in Evenor. The culture here is much like that of the Middle East, where women are second-class citizens at best and have no real say in who they marry. Clarice is married off to a nobleman named Lord Gareth Harrowing, and was the only thing that her father could not achieve himself as a wealthy merchant, nobility. He just couldn't do it. So she lived a lowly life in the house, and try as she might, could not find more than 99 windows. It's called the House of 100 Windows, but she couldn't find the 100th window. Her husband was distant when he was home, but would often leave with no warning for days at a time, just leaving her there. Now, when he returned, he would expect his wife to be at his side. Very 50s, 1940s, 1950s sensibility. I mean, you could arguably go back to tribal humans, but we won't go through that. Let's see. One day of absence led Clarissa to discover a red light peeking through a secret wall. She took a skeleton key when the maid was out and entered the secret room to discover the 100th window, which was a stained glass portrait. It contained a handsome man who spoke to her, telling her that he was trapped there by a powerful wizard, and asked if she would set him free. She looked through the window and saw a sea of humanoid creatures. She was excited and thrilled at the attention she received from the man and drew him out. They danced in a ballroom as her husband came home. He called her to back away from the man, as the man was Dominic, the Goblin King. Slight Labyrinth vibe here. Just throwing it out there. Those creatures were human, and he turned them into goblins. They locked into battle and demanded that she choose one of them over the other. And instead, she chose neither, except her freedom, and freed the trapped goblins in the window that attacked the two wizards. They became locked in the window, and she became known as the Lady of Evenor, master of her own fate. I love this, dude, because Clarice. Yeah, not that Clarice. I love the idea of empowered female characters. Again, I love horror films, and nearly every horror film is about they're called final girls for a reason. It's about a woman overcoming insurmountable supernatural odds. And she just, it's this wildly empowering. And I mean, there's other things that, get in the way of all that. But that's the underlying message that I like to take away from it. And this story is that. And I really appreciate that. Let's see. Lifestyle like Kerr and DragonLance. Yeah, that's exactly right. Just like Kerr. Clarice, you say, is her husband named Hannibal. That would be awesome. Goblins in Ravenloft are humans that had given up and surrendered to the darkness. Interesting. Okay. Halloween franchise. Yeah, absolutely. If I remember correctly, most if not all these stories were a more detailed story of the lords of the domains of Ravenloft. The one missing was Strahd, which had his own book. He actually does have a story at the very end of this that we'll get into here. Okay. Thanks for joining live, Charlie. Good to see you. Song Snatcher by Elaine Cunningham is the next. So this is about the bard named Larson. He lives the life of a bard, traveling from domain to domain. He was raised in a monastery and learned to use herbs to drug the monastery's famous mead. He would use this in pursuit of the Lianan She, which is a vampiric ghost of obsession that would drain a bard of their desire to sing, as well as their life force. He had drained one before and learned many songs and the ability to play instruments from it, and became addicted to the sensation. He travels to Cartacus, to the Fireside Fishka Inn, where he meets the famous bard Quintish. He sees that Quintish is obsessed with love and drugs him so he could follow him to the Liana She. Quintish dies from the drug, but Larson now knows that he has a new spirit to drain. Meanwhile, he starts sleeping with another resident bard named Elamir. He drugs her nightly so he can go, leave her, go seek out the Lianan She, and she fears as she wakes up and doesn't see him that he's actually under the Lianan She's spell. He then realizes how fortunate he was to find another spirit and decided to turn to draining women bards instead, starting with Elamir. So this is just an addict. This whole story is just about an addict. He gets his fix of draining these spiritual creatures for their knowledge and ability, and so he goes in search of that fix. Damn everything else, he uses the abilities that he's learned from draining in order to do it. So it's this really nice twist of a mortal draining an immortal rather than the traditional way it happens. And then ultimately, he realizes that he doesn't need to hunt these rare species. He could just hunt other bards and just kill them. I thought that was kind of interesting. There is a bit of a pattern here arising about the women of Ravenloft. They're always wildly sexy, super into fucking... I'm sorry, that was super into having sex with anyone. I'm trying to keep the swearing down here on this channel. They're just wild abandoned. There's never a woman in any of these stories that clutches pearls or is a little hesitant or modest in any way. It's always just like, oh, you want? Yeah, DTF, let's do this. It's like, what? This is not, I know it's fantasy, it's not real, but still, it's a ridiculous stereotype of fantasy. All right, let's see here. Some of these stories are good, others are meh. Yeah, for sure. Typical of franchise, sometimes you get Timothy Zahn, which is great. I got those books down there. And other times you get C.S. Godot. I don't know who that is, which sounds like I don't want to know who that is. Okay, so the next story is called Undefiled by James M. Ward. It presents Lord Tennant, a knight, and his sister Lady Laram, a mage, who were traveling near Estrangia when they were attacked by the vampire Crave. The knight fought off the vampire, but his sister was gravely wounded in the battle. Lord Tennant traveled to the city and entered the Temple of White Hope. The knight demanded that they do something to heal his sister, and the friar, a balding man named Whelm, prayed to his god, and sister raised up, healed by Weary. The knight demanded help killing the vampire, but no one agreed to help, and the monk told him that he would not recommend fighting Crave, but if he did, he was in the cemetery nearby, guarded by traps and creatures while the vampire slept through the day. So the knight didn't care. He went to still exact revenge. He traveled and killed all the minions, faced off against Crave again, seriously wounding him, but Crave was too much of a match and tore the knight apart. He fled to feed on the sister. Now, the funeral for the knight was brief, and when the monk entered the temple, Crave the vampire was waiting, and it's revealed that Crave was the minion of the monk, who was an even more powerful undead creature, using him and feeding off the residents' life force. He healed Crave and sent him away. So this is a case that I love, because in the real world, you're seeing this in France in the news right now. You see it a lot in the 80s and early 90s, and arguably in the 70s in America, where boys and girls are actually abused and raped by priests. Like, this is a regular occurrence throughout the world, and it is filthy and vile and disgusting. And these people that are being held up as the holiest of holies, people that are like between you and your God, are actually the worst monsters on the planet. There's too many examples to ignore it. And this story is yet another one of them, except in fiction. And I like that it gives the little mirror there of reality. You think they're holy, you think they're all, bastions of morality, and in truth, they're craven, vile creatures who succumb to the worst, thoughts and behaviors. It's not the rule, but it is the exception, and it's disgusting, and I like that a story put that right in the forefront, because it's really brave to do that, to be quite honest. Women are that way, and men, after all the terrible monsters that could come eat you while you're in the John, and no real heroes to fix the problems. Yeah, okay. That's it. Yeah, it's just weird. I don't know. Okay, so the next story is called The Briar at the Window by Roger E. Moore. And this is about Lord Godfrey of Mordant, master of Griffin Hill and Weathermay Estates. He's interrupted reading a history book by a Briar at the window when he opens and grasps the plant which dies in his hand. It's slowly revealed that Lord Godfrey is a ghost who murdered his wife and child. His wife was looking longingly at the stable boy, and his rage overtook him. He fakes their deaths, and none were the wiser about it until the night when the ghosts came back from the grave and consumed him. He then came back in death and relived the same torment events nightly. I like this. It reminds me a lot of Lord Soth's story, so it's a little derivative, but the idea that you start the story thinking this guy is being haunted, and you realize that he's actually reliving his own haunted behavior over and over again, which is really kind of cool. It's almost like The Others, the film with Nicole Kidman, really great Victorian Gothic horror film. But yeah, I just spoiled it, but very similar storyline as that. Now I feel bad. I hope you guys have seen The Others. Nocturne is the next story. The history, the priest class held knowledgeable to keep population down and were a lot of the times evil. Whew, I believe that. Roger E. Moore just plagiarized the Lord Soth book. Yeah, I totally did, Commander. Totally did. All right, so the next story is Nocturne by Alan C. Kupfer, or Kupfer. And this is set in the domain of Richmulat. The Burgermeister, which I guess is like the local police or mayor or something, Klaus Nellak, is retiring to bed and finds a rat perched on his stomach, and it bites his finger and then scurries off. The next day at the city council, he brings up the rat problem, and the council decides to do something about it. Just then, a piper from Hamlin offers his services to round up the rats. We all know this basic story, right? The council balked at the claim, and they conceded to test his skills in one of their cellars. Then the nobleman Klaus Rainier enters and decides to follow his counsel. The nobleman sort of runs the city. So he follows his counsel to witness the events of this piper. His granddaughter, Jacqueline, is talking with one of the rats who shared the story about biting Klaus and learns about the piper. She travels to the cellar in mist form to witness it, and many rats are ended up burned alive as she sits there horrified. She then retreats to the bog to reflect, and her grandfather approaches. Her grandfather is the nobleman Klaus Renoir, or Rainier, and proceeds to lure, let's see. He asks if she wants to deal with the Piper or he should, and she says that she's going to deal with it and proceeds to lure the Piper to the bog as he planned to lure the rats, and she drove him into the water through her enchantment. Then she sets the rats loose on him, tearing at his flesh. It ends with the Burgermeister investigating the Piper's disappearance at the bog, discovering him, and running for his life. So this is where the monsters get revenge on those trying to eradicate them. Again, as a horror fan, I like that twist. I like it when the monsters get away with it sometimes because it's fake. It's not real. That makes it okay in my head. Rats, the great test for the first level adventurers. Yeah, for real. That and like a skeleton or a zombie. That's a good first level end boss or something. I guess it's better than slimes. Like I grew up with Dragon Warrior and you just ran around killing slimes. And the rare chance you got that metallic slime and you just hoped you could hit him before he ran away and get all the gold. Yeah, sorry. No flashback there. Okay, what's the next story here? The Wailing by Kate Novak. This begins as George Weathermay, a ranger in Darkon, hired by a man named Soldist to retrieve his child for his wife. The child was abducted by a Vistania woman. George tracks her to a mountain range and is surprised by her club knocking him out. He awakens to see her reading Taroka and reveals the truth about the child. Her granddaughter, the Vistania's granddaughter, was seduced by Soldist, and when he sent men to claim the child for his own, she died defending the child. The Vistania is now bringing the child to the Sad One, which is a drow banshee who lost her own deformed child similarly and has been accepting infants ever since. George tracks the drow down and is deformed by its grip. He realizes the children are dying with the drow as she's a banshee and cannot care for living children. He steals the infant and runs away only to be caught and confronted again by the banshee. He tries to reason with the banshee, who ultimately lets him leave, and the deformed hand and the child's body ends up being healed due to the distance between the banshee and them. He brings it to Soldist's wife, reveals the story to her, and confirms that she'll still care for the child, even knowing that it's illegitimate and, based off of rape and murder. She accepts and says that she will take care of the child, and he tells her that he's going to regularly come in and check in on the child and make sure that it's being taken care of properly. I liked this because it was a bit of a twist again. You start thinking, okay, this is a simple abduction. You're going to go get the Vistania woman. You're going to get the child and you're going to leave. Then you realize the guy that hired you actually seduced the woman and then tried to steal the baby from her so that he could give it to his current wife. That's just filthy. That's dirty. And the ranger's concern during the whole story is that even if he collects the child as he was hired to do, there's no way the wife is going to accept it and take care of it, knowing where and how it came to be. But it ends up working out in the end, which is really nice. And I love the idea that the Vistania don't realize the fate of these infants, only that they're delivering it to this drow. There's this history of how the drow ended up, being without child and stuff that I didn't get into in my brief synopses. But I find it really interesting that at every turn of this story, it gets darker and more twisted until the very end, where there's this beautiful catharsis of a mother loving a child. And that's it. That doesn't seem to be the case in any story in Ravenloft ever. So I like a happy ending when I can get one from time to time. Okay, so the next story is, Grind Warrior eventually got the right to go buy Grind Quest in the US. The name was evidently taken by the RPG at the time. Dragon Warrior. Grindfest, yeah, for real. Interesting, okay. So Von Kharkov is the next story by Jean DeWeese, whatever. Now this centers on Ulrich von Kharkov and how he is under control of other powerful creatures. He feels the death of his current master, Dakovny. Then the influx of a new master's voice in his mind. These masters make him turn into a beast and kill on their behalf. He's fleeing to the mists in order to free himself from their influence. He barely manages to hide into the mist when it drops him into a jungle. Suddenly, a female magician appears through the mist, and a panther enters the area. He stands and faces off against the panther, who bows its head and then just sort of walks away. But the beast within him has been awakened in the contest of Alpha, and as soon as it's awakened, he is trying to communicate to the female magician, "You need to run. I am not in control here." But all that's coming out are beast sounds during his full transformation. I'm getting a very American Werewolf in London vibe as I'm reading this, which I just absolutely adore. And so as soon as she realizes that he is actually transforming into a beast, and it doesn't ever say what the beast is until later. So at this point, you don't know what he is. It's just that he turned into a beast. In my head, I'm thinking werewolf, but I was wrong. And she sees him and she freaks out and immediately starts running away as he comes up behind her to get her. Dang it. I got to stop free-forming this review because I lose my place. So the beast within him awakened. He told her to run, and he transforms into the beast. Terrified, she flees from him, but is too slow, and he devours her. He absorbs her soul and actually feels her mind in terror as he's murdering her. He now feels subservient to the beast within him rather than to a master. Then an old fat wizard appears before him through the mist, and memories begin to flood into his mind. He realizes that he was always the beast, and it's actually a panther that he turns into. And it's this big fat old magician that abducted him from this very jungle, transformed him into a human, and implanted all these false human memories in order to control him. He finally accepts his nature and returns to this natural panther form, devouring the magician. This was another story that I thought was great because there was this beautiful twist at the end. We always get the side of a human being afflicted with lycanthropy or being transformed in some way. We never usually get the beast that is transformed. And I thought that was an interesting way to twist it. And he starts this position of being pretty much the slave to these masters that this magician sold him to. And then as soon as one master dies, which he can feel, another one is trying to take its place. And so he's continuously just has no control over his own life. He flees trying to find it, and then it suddenly becomes subdominant to the beast within him. But the truth is he's always been in control because he's always been the beast. It's all about perspective. I think that's great. I think it's just great. Okay. The names of the characters are so cliche. Every time you mention it, reminds you how Gene Wilder pronounced it. Now it's Frankenstein. Well, they told me it was Frankenstein. Well, they were wrong then, weren't they? That was Igor part, though. I messed that up. I thought it was Igor. Anyway, Sight and Sound is the next story by DJ Heinrich. It's an amazing horror story about a brother who goes to rescue his sister from a madman who... Wait, what? Oh, yeah, okay. I know the story now. From a madman who eloped with her. This man is accused of murdering his previous wives, so Lord Henridan is justified in trying to rescue his sister, Laurel. He calls Lord Bluebeard a murderer and wants to save his sister, but Bluebeard doesn't seem to care, only that he will not give his sister back unless he can guarantee that he will not spread the lies about him about being a murderer. Lord Henridan gives him his word of honor as a gentleman, but Bluebeard wants his tongue. Now, if he doesn't give his tongue up, he's never going to see his sister again. Ultimately, because Lord Henridan loves his sister, he concedes to the price. And it has this great description of Lord Henridan with his big fat sausage fingers going into the guy's mouth and ripping out the tongue from the root. And the guy, Lord Henridan, actually hearing the tearing of the tendons and flesh as it's coming out of his mouth. Truly beautiful graphic horror. It was so great. And so, of course, he passes out from the blood. Before he passes out, Lord Bluebeard tells him, now that the price is paid, you can have your sister and you guys can leave and go about your life however you want to live it. But If you're still in my house by dawn, you're both mine to torture. So then he passes out from the pain and the blood loss. Horrible. He wakes up in the middle of the dark room, not knowing where he is. The Lord Bluebeard told him that his sister was in an adjacent room. And so he's frantically running around trying, he can't call out or speak or anything. So he's trying to find the other doors, and he goes into different rooms trying to find her. He finally gets to the room. I'm just going to freeform this because this is a great story. He finally gets to the room with his sister in it. And he's like making all these sounds, trying to say her name and call her to him. But she's just sort of sitting there at the window, staring out, horrified. She's like, leave me alone. Please don't hurt me again. I don't want to be hurt again. Please, please, please. So she's begging for whoever this man could be not to hurt her. She assumes it's Bluebeard. He doesn't realize that, she's having these issues, and he's trying to get her to understand. He goes down to her knees, and he's like holding her, like, trying to talk to her. And she gets more and more horrified. And he doesn't understand why she can't see that it's him, her brother. And then the sun comes up and the light streams through the window, and he sees that her eyes were torn out. And that's why she doesn't understand it. That's why she was terrified about being Lord Bluebeard. And now the sun's out. They're both trapped. And that's the end of the story. It is so great as a horror story. I absolutely loved it. And just the idea of ripping the tongue out at the root. I don't even know, where's the root of your tongue start? Is it like in your throat? Is it just at the back of your mouth? Like the thought of it is horrifying. But then imagine being the sister, the wife of this madman who ripped her eyes out. Ah, it's awesome. This is the type of horror I love. Great story. Okay. What's the next one? The next one is The Judgment of Abd-al-Mamat by Jeff Grubb. Jeff Grubb did a ton of Dragonlance stuff. It's a tale of contentment, wanting more and never being happy with what you have. This is very sort of Arabian Nights vibe in the story. It's like a tale that should end at one point for the moral, but then continues going, and then it continues going, and then it just never seems to end. That's how I felt. I did not really enjoy this story, but we're going to get into it. So this spells the end to Abd-al-Mamat and ends with his coming resurrection. He started as a very poor boy, then became known for his wisdom and was chosen to be the vizier. It's like someone who counts, a counselor basically, to the sheik. His wisdom sent the sheik and all but one son to their deaths, but the people still wanted him to lead because they recognized that he was wise. So he taught the son of the sheik until it was time for the sheik to rule, but then ended up finding him guilty of murder and tortured him to death. So this whole story is this boy having aspirations, wanting more and more power, and through the use of his wisdom over these citizens, he's able to do horribly atrocious things, but they continue to follow him because they believe he's wise. Ultimately, it gets to a point where like two women come in and one man come in to seek his counsel. And they're like, look, we can't decide for him who he wants, but he wants both of us, but we're not going to let him have both of us. So you need to make him decide which one of us gets him. And he was like, how stupid are these people? I'm going to let them figure this out for themselves by giving them an impossible situation. He's like, look, if you guys can't come to terms with who gets who, then cut him in half and take half of him and be happy with it. So they cut him in half from his head to his groin, and each of them took the other half, stuffed him and created a body out of it, and took him home. And Abd-al-Mamat was just stunned at what these people were willing to do because he said it. And so he eventually got to a point where he was just building up all these really extreme rules, much like the king priest of Istar, where if you do this infraction, you're going to get your hand cut off, you're going to get your leg chopped off. So everyone that was part of a citizen in this now very wealthy city was maimed in some way because of his judgments. Until a great storm came and tore him apart for his vile judgments. His scorn for those that he ruled led to his evil nature. Nature itself ended up taking out vengeance on him for his vile judgments, but then he's tortured to come back after 100 years and relive all of this over and over again. So really kind of interesting to let you know how far people are willing to go based on trust in their leaders. I'm not going to get political, but we can see examples of that all across our world, all in our history, and even arguably today. Okay, so the next story was the rigor of the game, which I did at the very beginning. Jeff Grubb rips off the Dune Messiah and the Bible's King Solomon. Is that what that is? I did not know that. That's interesting. You should definitely read that tongue part, Xylox. It's gross. Like in the best way. All right, so the next story is Cold Hard Silver by Juanita Coulson. And this is about a warrior named Hans who was bestowed a magical sword from a wizard. He used the sword to command troops and win himself a kingdom, only to have the mists come and take him to Barovia. Then he plotted to return to no avail. He kidnapped and assaulted the Vistania women, murdering anyone who stood in his way. Then he learned of a silver mine in Mount Bartok. He planned to steal the silver from the miners, buy himself a kingdom, but he didn't count on Jezero Wagner, or Wagner, the Ice Queen. She is a specter that used to reign over these lands in life, but in death haunts it, stealing the life and warmth from her victims. She came into the camp one night and killed everyone except for the enslaved Vistani and Hans's brother, who was in love with her. They escaped, and Jezero danced throughout the night. This is a very simple sort of revenge, happenstance story. If they didn't go after that silver, they never would have run into Jezero, and there never would have been an issue. But they did, and so they died. It almost reminded me of, I got the book on my Kindle, but I don't have it open. They made a movie after it. The Forest? No, the Runes? Anyway, it's a great story about a bunch of friends who go camping and they hiking through, where is it? It's like in, my mind is going blank because I'm just focused on this, all this Ravenloft stuff. Anywhere, it's up in like Norway or somewhere like that, which ends up being haunted by this creature that ends up hunting them down and killing them as they're going through these woods and run across these sort of shitty metalheads that are like running this little town worshiping this creature that's like, running the forest. Anyway, that's what it reminded me of. It was a very short story. I didn't find anything of value for it. I mean, bad guys do bad things. Sometimes they get punished for it. You get a little bit of history about Jezero, but not enough to feel satisfied. You don't get any history about the Vistania people who end up surviving. You don't get a whole lot of backstory about the people, the bad guys in the first place. So it just felt like it was setting everything up so that you could have this Ice Queen kill a bunch of people. And that's just not enough for me. I need a little bit more detail. So the Blair Witch Project. That's not the one I was thinking of at all, but that was a good one too, actually. Do you remember when that first came out, the Blair Witch Project? I was in the military stationed in Germany at the time, and it was the first viral campaign that really struck the internet in the burgeoning years of the internet. And people believed it was real. Like, they believed those actors died because they thought it was real, right? So when the actors came to the red carpet for the award shows, they didn't believe it was actually the actors. They thought they were stunt actors because they believed the documentary was real. It wasn't a documentary. It's just a stupid horror film. Found footage. It was great. The Ritual. Thank you, Zytox. Oh my gosh. Oh, the book is infinitely better than the movie, but still the movie's good. That was driving me crazy. Thank you, Zylox. I really appreciate you saving my sanity like that. Okay, this next story is pretty good. It's called Objects d'Art by J. Robert King. And it's centered around the idea of immortality, though not as we think of it. Marquis de Palerno is hosting an event of art and dining, and he's offering the elixir of immortality, but only to those who deserve it. Professor Fearwood of Darkon is attending and quickly learns that he must placate the artistic sensibilities of De Polarno so that he can drink of this elixir. After dinner, the group is taken into different rooms of sculpture, fresco, and paintings that are as grotesque, violent, and absurd as life is. And as the members of the group dwindle because of their pearl-clutching and disturbed sensibilities, very Victorian of them. Again, most all of Ravenloft is Victorian anyways in its sensibilities. They just sort of disappear from everyone else as they continue further into the art rooms. They learn that they're in a magical area where no one really leaves, but are actually offered a form of immortality as pieces of the art itself. They're alive in the stone or in the painting, but they're not free. They're trapped. So they then reach the final room, and Fairwood is offered to drink from the fountain. Now, I want to put a pin in this and try to explain the situation in more detail, because it's kind of absurd. Fairwood knows that the other group members that he's with have turned into painting or statues, because De Polarno straight up told him. He's like, it was sort of a Willy Wonka moment when they finally get to the end and he's explaining to Charlie, look, all these kids deserved what they got, and you stole, you get nothing. Except in this case, he doesn't say you get nothing. You can drink from the elixir if you want to. But everyone else is suffering a form of immortality. Why do you think that this elixir is going to be different? Why would you possibly think? Okay, but he has high hopes. So he's like, you know what? They're all stupid. I'm smart. I survived to the end. I'm going to drink this elixir. And so he drinks it, and De Polarno starts tearing the dude's flesh and muscle and bone off of his essence or his ethereal spirit, right? And all that's left at the end is Fairwood trapped in this room as a spirit without the means of speaking or hearing or seeing anything. So he got his immortality, just not in the way he wanted it. He thought immortality meant immortal as a mortal, not immortal as a spirit. And so that's the only part of this story that I enjoyed, was that there was no lie. This guy, De Polarno, gave everyone immortality that wanted it, just not in the way they expected it. So I guess the thing that you can take from this, the lesson you should be taking from this, is read the fine print. Make sure before you agree to something, you understand what you're getting into. Oh man, your Google foo has served you well today. Nice. Okay, so then, I enjoyed the story. I liked the twist of it. This setup was a little, trite. Okay, so the next story is called The Freak. This one. So this is a straight up ripoff of Frankenstein and the Headless Horseman. Let me preface that. So The Freak by Nick Pollotta is about a horribly disfigured hermit. The townsfolk brutalize him and chase him, trying to hang him for the death of a gypsy that he had nothing to do with. Now, the Freak is innocent, but the mob wants blood. They catch him as they're prepared to hang him, the landscape changes and a Headless Horseman comes out of this road that just showed up underneath their feet and cuts all of their heads off. The Freak freaks out. He runs into the town in order to warn everyone about this Headless Horseman. No one's in the streets, so he goes to the bar. Everyone seems to be hanging out at the bar, as one does in a village after nightfall. And he's trying to explain to everyone what's happened. The problem is, he's the Freak. And so they don't believe anything he's saying. They think that he killed the people because they knew they were going after him to go hang him for the murder of the gypsy, which he didn't do. But it doesn't matter because he's a freak, right? And so they all start beating him and throwing stuff at him, and they grab him and hold him there as two guys go out to get the mayor to sign a writ of execution for this moment of him killing everyone else, supposedly, in addition to the gypsy. As soon as those two go outside the door, they hear the screaming neighing of a nightmare horse, and the head's lopped off and blood starts oozing under the door into the inn or the tavern or whatever. So the townsfolk immediately think, oh boy, anyone who tries to hurt this guy is getting killed by the Headless Horseman. So let's all be nice to him. So they're like, okay, well, you can go now. Safe travels. Have a good night. You know, he leaves. He wakes up the next morning exhausted, but he sees all these gifts all over. Like, the townspeople are doing everything they can to give him things so that he never has to go in town, in order to make him feel like they like him, so that they won't in turn be murdered. Now here's the problem. He at first thinks this is great. They gave me gifts. They love me. I'm loved. And then he finds a note which says, you don't need to come in town anymore. We've given you all the stuff you're going to need. Have a happy life. And he realized that they didn't do it for him. They did it out of fear, which infuriates him. So he goes back into town, and he's like walking around town, and he realizes, you know what? They're all faking like they like me. I don't need their actual appreciation or friendship. Whatever. I'm just going to leave. I'll go to another town or something. It doesn't matter. So he turns to leave, rounds a corner, accidentally bumps into a mother and her daughter. The daughter drops a toy or a parcel or something. He reaches down to pick it up to give it to her. He's like, here's your parcel. And she screams, don't let the monster get me, Mommy. Don't let the monster get me, Mommy. And she's like, you can't have my daughter, and runs off. Immediately, the whole town is like, he's assaulting children now? We must kill him no matter what. Screw the Headless Horseman. And so they all chase him out into the forest. He's running for his life. And suddenly, the whole townspeople are out in the forest, and the Headless Horseman comes. And behind the Headless Horseman are all of the heads of the people that he's lopped off thus far. And so he's over there just chopping people's heads off. The heads are like gnawing at all of the standing bodies and stuff. And he's like sitting there cowering like, why is this happening to me? Why is the Headless Horseman doing this? And he realizes, I'm being used. I'm being used by the Headless Horseman in order to collect heads, so he can justify killing people. And then just as he says that, the Headless Horseman rides up and slices his face, making him look more disfigured. So he's even going to be more monstrous for people to be terrified. And the Headless Horseman leaves, and that's the end of the story. It's this weird situation where one supernatural creature is using another supernatural creature in order to like get his soul fix, as it were. It was really strange. It was a weird twist. Hey, Seth, thanks for joining live, man. Appreciate you. I thought it was really strange that they did it like that. I'm one of those people that really, really loves the story of Frankenstein. I think it's a tragic tale. And if you ever read the novel, Frankenstein's monster, the creature, is like a caring human being who has intelligence, learns languages, and genuinely cares about life and happiness and a sense of connection to other human beings. It's everyone else that's the monster, not him. There's something genuinely human about that, because most people at one or more times in their life don't feel connected to everyone else. They feel isolated and alone, and sometimes they're actively picked on or abused, which makes them connect with that idea even more. And to take that type of a creature and turn him into a tool for some soul-thirsty monster, I think does a bit of disservice to the story, to that type of a creature, to that type of human connection. So I enjoyed it for the fact that it was a monster using a monster. I didn't like the fact that they twisted Frankenstein into, the story of Frankenstein into, I don't know, an abuser's story or something. It's kind of crappy. Yeah, he learned how to read by listening to, I think he was in France at the time, but I can't remember for sure at this moment. Maybe Austria or something. But he was just like hid in their barn, and then he would like listen underneath their windowsill to them talk and tell stories, and contextually learned how to speak and read from them. That's amazing. And he was just, I'm going to have to do something on Frankenstein or something, because it's an amazing novel. It's really, really good. Specifically about the human condition. Okay, anyway, that was the Freak. A little reductive. The Weaver's Pride is a story by Elaine Bergstrom. And it's about Wells, a guild weaver of Arbora. He's presented with some beautiful sort of cocoon threads by a nomad and is offered them in trade for one of his weaved fabrics or pieces of clothing. When he offers a large amount of the thread, the weaver can't help himself but trade for it. He then takes all day crafting this beautiful bolt of cloth from the silk and makes this silver length of cloth that's more beautiful than anything the master has ever created before. People are coming in trying to buy it. He doesn't want to separate himself from it because he's so proud of this beautiful piece of cloth that it almost shimmers itself in the dark. It's so vibrant, in silver to look at. Noblemen are coming in, offering him obscene amounts of money for the bolt of cloth, and he will not part with it. So one night, a thief breaks in trying to steal the cloth, and the scene ends with the wife of the weaver, murdering the thief. But she is completely in shock. She's like, look, I didn't mean to kill him. It's just I wanted to stop him, but the bolt of cloth itself grabbed the thief and started wrapping itself around his head and suffocating him. And as soon as the thief let go of my hand that I was trying to stab him, that's when I actually ended up stabbing him. And so he died. And it wasn't me, it was the cloth. No one believes her, of course. And of course, no one sees any harm in what she did. He was clearly a thief trying to steal their wares. So the dad is like, look, I'm way too proud of this cloth to have any thief come in here and take it. We're going to have guard shifts 24 hours a day, all night, watching this cloth in teams of 2. So the family breaks up these shifts. But that means they don't have time to continue making more cloth, more weaving, in order to sell. So their inventory is dwindling. The brothers who are doing the night watch decide to have one of the brothers go weave and the other brother stand watch. Now, someone breaks in during the weaving, knocks the weaving brother out, and murders the other brother. But when they waken and find the son murdered, the dad is more concerned about the cloth. And it has this little mark on it that looks like a face or something. But there's no sign of any thief. And so ultimately the family's like, look, we need to get rid of this. This is cursed. There's something happening with this cloth. You're way too proud of it, and it's causing us to, spiral into this massive downfall. We have a murdered son, which you don't seem to care about at all. All you want to do is protect this stupid cloth. Just sell it, and we can buy a new, better store in a different town and move on with our lives. But he is way too proud of this cloth to let go of it. Ultimately, a wizard appears to the other son and says, look, I'm going to get this cloth, and you can make a profit of it. And at this point, the brother's like, yeah, I don't want the cloth here. I'll gladly take your money so that you can come in and steal the cloth. So he does. The dad comes down. Well, first of all, he gave him a little potion in order to drug his father because his father was going to run watch because he didn't trust the family anymore to watch during the night. So the father's sleeping. The wizard comes in, grabs it. The father wakes up, sees it gone, and immediately blames the mother, starts physically beating her to death, and ends up stopping when the son's like, I did it. It was me. I took money from a wizard. I drugged you. This cloth is driving you insane. It has cursed all of us. You don't care about your own son dying. You're only concerned about this cloth. It's good that it's gone. This is a blessing that it's gone. And so he kills his son. Of course he does. And he goes after the wizard. He tracks the wizard down to this camp, finds him. The wizard's like, have a seat. Let's talk about this. And the cloth ends up wrapping itself around the weaver's head, sucks his soul and body into it. And that's where that little face mark was. Now there's 2 face marks from him and the thief that tried to steal it. And the wizard grabs the cloth as the closing statement saying, I will forever protect you and make sure you get fed ostensibly, as long as you don't kill me. And that was it. So he put so much of himself into this cloth that he gave it life in some way, and all it wanted was souls. Now, there was never any explanation of why it was cursed, why it was possessed, why, was it the thread that the nomad gave him? It didn't explain that there was any hatred there. So it was just a weird thing that happened. Okay, this is just Little Shop of Horrors, I guess? Taking a plant, spill a little blood in it, and it wants more. Okay. Kind of goofy and silly, but I dig it nonetheless. The next story is called The Glass Man by William W. Connors, and it's about Julio, a thief in Haslan, who decides to rob the wizard Haslick. This is a silly story. So he's unaware that the wizard is performing experiments, trying to gain access into the ether in order to escape Ravenloft. So when the thief comes in, breaks into his keep, steals his treasure, he becomes yet another experiment for the wizard. So at first, Julio doesn't notice, and he begins writing in his journals about this triumphant job of stealing so many items of value. He wanted to write down every detail to make sure that when he recited it to other people, they wouldn't forget how he outwitted the wizard. He goes to an inn as he's heading back to his thieves guild. And guards come in searching for him, calling him by name. Where is he? He stole from the thief or something. Like, they know exactly who he is, which is weird. But what's more weird is that he's sitting right there in the middle of the tavern, and the guards don't see him, and no one else sees him. He's like invisible, and he's like, I don't know. I've never been invisible before. Is it one of these items that I took from the wizard's keep? And he's like, whoa, now that I'm invisible, I can actually enact some revenge because my guildmaster's a dick. I'm going to go kill him. And so he goes to his guildmaster and he's like torturing him and killing him, but he doesn't see him. And so he's saying, you need to know my name before you die. You need to know that I did it. I, Julio, am the one that kills you. And the guy doesn't know who the hell's talking because he can't hear him. He can't see him. He's completely invisible. So now he's not only invisible, he can't speak. No one else can hear him at all. So he starts to write down on a piece of paper, Julio killed you, and hands the paper over to the guy, and the guy's already dead. But then the paper falls out of his hand, like through his hand. So this is a case of he's actually like disappearing completely. So he goes to the guild hall to try to find something or someone to help him. Maybe someone knows some magic. And they're all lamenting the loss of the guild leader. And he can't believe that these people actually like this guy, or they're feigning that they liked him anyway. They bring up the note saying that Julio killed him. They're like, oh, we got to go kill Julio. And so she drops the note that's talking. He goes to try to collect the note, but it goes through her hand. He can't touch anyone. He can't talk to anyone. No one can see that he's there. And then just sort of... And it cuts to the wizard who's like, experiment 32. Failure. He's just trying to find a way to, experiment on these thieves stealing his stuff in order to get this potion so that he can get the hell out of Ravenloft. I thought it was a kind of cool premise. Totally twist the whole story of the thief stealing from the wizard and the wizard getting retribution, right? In this particular case, the wizard lured him. Like, I've got golden jewels. I dare you to take them. Which is really kind of fun. Okay, so the next story, we're almost done. There's 2 left. So the next story is called Dark Tryst by Andria Cardarelle, a.k.a. Andy Hayday. So this is a bit of a twisted tale of lust. Mariella is a Vistania who is on her outs with her tribe. Magda, who was actually from the Lord Soth novel, the Vistani that he ended up taking. Magda was the only Vistania who is favorable to her, and she's died, and she doesn't feel like she's going to be welcomed for very long in the tribe. So one evening, a mist forms around her, and a hand reaches through the fire to touch her thigh. And it's very erotic, this story. So it's not like it poked her thigh. It's like it caressed her thigh, moving up it. So the mist returns to her bed at night, and she hears this name, Damius, coming into her mind, and it's asking her, say my name, say my name. And so she says his name. He materializes in front of her, and then they just like have passionate sex, and they're like in it. So much like some of the scenes in the Dark Disciple trilogy, Dragonlance, very erotic, very sexy, very, very cool. This has just a flair of that. Enough of a flair that any kid could pick it up and read it, and it wouldn't, tell them anything that they shouldn't know or hear. But it still leans into it, so it's kind of awesome. So she's obsessed with Damius, who appears the next night as she wanted and ravages her, and she is, just thrilled by it. The third night, he doesn't come, but a storm emerges, so she's going out trying to find him. She gets lost and falls into this mud that's almost like quicksand. So something pulls her out as she passes out. She wakes up in this cavern with these pale, beautiful gypsies all around her, and it turns out that they are Damius's tribe. They talk about being barren and needing Mariella to help them get a child. Then Damius will invite her to be a member of the tribe. So Damius gives her this ring that once you stroke it 3 times, a little thing pops up, a little red rocket, and she's supposed to stab the baby to collect blood with it. She is really torn up about this. She's like, what if it kills the baby? I don't want to, I don't want to hurt a baby. And but I want to be with them. Like, my old tribe clearly doesn't want me anymore. And these guys are pretty awesome. And, I'm in love with this guy. So ultimately she relents. She goes back to the tribe and asks, one of the girls, tells her that she'll hold the baby so that she can deal with a son who's injured. She stabs the baby behind the knee to try to hide the mark and collects the blood. Ends up that, the mother hears the baby crying and takes the baby back and stuff. So she ends up leaving, goes back to her room, and Darius shows up. I'm sorry, I'm doing this by memory and not reading my review, which I should be doing. So she returns to the camp, and I totally jumped ahead. She goes back to that Damius's tribe, gives the ring to him. They're thrilled. One of the ladies takes the ring, which turns into this form, which turns into a baby, and starts crying, and she walks away with it. Damius thanks her for everything that she's done, but tells her she needs to go back to her tribe and collect her things. And she looks down at her hands, and her hands are all black. That's a sign of having harmed a Vistania. I don't know if this is a curse that the Vistania put on the world, that if you harm them, your hands go black, or if it's something that the Vistania do to someone after they have harmed them. But whatever the case, her hands are black. She goes back to the tribe. They see her for what she is. They freak out, call her devil, and they start throwing rocks at her and stoning her to death. She doesn't move. She just sits there. She's like, yeah, I deserve this. Crazy. So she literally dies. Her ethereal spirit wakes up with Damius in the cave in the tribe and the baby, and that's it. She is now with the healthy baby with this new tribe. She just had to die to do it. Really weird, man. Yeah, Julio. We need to make Julio pay for killing the master. Who? Julio? Who? Yeah, that is pretty funny. I didn't even think of that. Okay, so this final story is about Strahd von Zarovich. We finally get to the end of all this billions of stories to get to the master of Castle Ravenloft. I was a little disappointed by the story, actually. So this is called Caretaker by P.N. Elrod. It's a short story about Strahd von Zarovich in his avatar persona of Lord Vasily. The story is about how Strahd is master of his domain, not the Seinfeld version of master of your domain, but he looks after his own in his own way. A town is burned by bandits, and Strahd goes to investigate and extinguishes the fire. He finds an abandoned girl in a well and rescues her, then hunts down the bandits that murdered and burned the townspeople. He calls on the pack of wolves and kills all of them and feeds off all of them before exploding the last of them in the cave with a little bit of bat guano and some sort of magic, which made it into this 2-foot radius ball, basically a bomb. He nearly burned himself up in the explosion, and so he couldn't go outside because dawn was approaching too quickly. But ultimately, the next dawn, he went out to go check on the girl to make sure she was okay, because he cares about the people of Barovia as long as he doesn't want to eat them. It set up Strahd as the caretaker. He takes care of his people when he feels like they should be taken care of, and he abuses them when he feels like they should be abused. Okay, yeah, I kind of figured a vampire would be that way. I didn't expect him to fully care so much, though. And this story really leaned into how Strahd actually cares about this girl and about her health and welfare. And he's resisting his desire to feed off of her. I thought it was really strange for a vampire. Like, why do you care? Who cares? You got bandits roaming the hills? Okay, kill them. But why care about the kid? I don't know. It was weird. It adds this sense of humanity to something that is not human. It's a monster in all definitions of the word. I don't know. He rolled a 1 with the guano bomb. He totally did. And then his dexterity roll botched. Yeah, it was pretty weird. So anyway, this collection, while pretty good all in all, was a bit of a chore for me to read. The only tale that I was looking forward to was the Lord Soth one, but there were others that ended up exciting me. I would not recommend this to Dragonlance fans, unless you enjoy horror anthologies. Then, hell, why not read it? My biggest takeaway from this is that I'm not as much of a fan of Ravenloft as I thought I was. I really thought in memory from having played the role-playing game and just loving horror that I thought I really loved this world, or these worlds of Ravenloft, but I really don't. I don't care about them at all. Like, the only one I even kind of care about is Sithicus, but then only so that Lord Soth will leave it in order to come back to Krynn. So, yeah, I was a little bummed. And I love horror films. I love Clive Barker's stories. I love Stephen King's stories. But I have no desire to revisit this collection after I'm finished with it. And it doesn't make me want to read any of the other Ravenloft novels either. It's just, if you want horror, there are so many better novels than Ravenloft novels out there. So much better writing. It's just, this was like made for a bunch of grognards who wanted to read about the world they played in, but didn't actually really love horror. They just loved the characters or something. It's just not good enough. It's just not good enough. And the stories that were really good were so few and far between that I had to slog through all the other ones. And it became a chore. And reading isn't supposed to be a chore. It's supposed to be fun and exciting and enticing. Like the other Dragonlance novels, I've enjoyed reading them. But this isn't Dragonlance, I understand. But it's just, it wasn't worth it to me. So if you don't love Ravenloft, if you're okay missing out on a story about Lord Soth, don't pick this book up. But if you're into it, definitely do. And that is my objective review. Oy vey. Was the girl reincarnated as Tatiana? I don't know. It probably did say her name when I originally read it. I don't even think it did. Like, her mother threw her down the well to protect her from the bandits that were raping, pillaging, and burning. So I don't recall a name ever coming out of her, because she was out of her mind, like freaking out, screaming and stuff when, like clutching on to Strahd when he was down in the well trying to get water so he could cast his water spell. Then there's a whole bunch of like extemporaneous explanation about the spells that Strahd had to cast and how he didn't quite have all of the material components for the spells. And what are you doing? Like, I don't want the game mechanics that bog down game sessions in the novel. Like, that's why they stopped doing it in Dragons of Autumn Twilight. Like, all of the other Dragonlance novels, after they had to slog through trying to add game mechanics to that story, they're like, it's not worth it. It's just not worth it. Let's just move on with just the story and forget the game mechanics, because it's a novel. It's not the game. But yeah, it was too much to slog through on that one. And it actually made me like Strahd less. Like, I like a powerful villain, you know? Give me someone who doesn't care about the people he harms or eats or feeds off of, because they're food. They are literally cattle in the way that we look at cattle. Like, literally, they're food. We don't like having them around. We cut them up and eat them. And other than that, we just kind of let people deal with them, you know, out of sight, out of mind. We don't like grab a cow, take it home, love it, care for it, and then go kill all the other cows. Like, that's like Charlotte's Web, you know? She loves the pig. She doesn't want him to die. I mean, he was an extraordinary pig. But, so P.N. Elrond also wrote the other Strahd novels, like this anthology. They have some good moments, but lots of hay. Yeah, meh. Anyway, I'm glad I read it, because now I know, and knowing's half the battle. But I always want to do like a reading rainbow thing, but don't take my word for it. Ending to these. But you can tell the era I was raised in. Thank you guys so much for tuning in live and sharing your thoughts in the chat. I love that. That's amazing. I really appreciate you, and I hope you enjoyed this review. What do you think of this novel? What do you think of the other Ravenloft novels? Do you like Ravenloft at all? Let me know in the comments below, or you can always email me at info@dragonlance-saga.com. That's kind of it. That's the end. I'd like to invite you to consider becoming a patron or member of this channel, and you can always pick up Dragonlance gaming materials using my affiliate link, all of which are in the description below. This channel is all about celebrating the wonderful world of the Dragonlance Saga, even sometimes when it's tangentially connected to Ravenloft. And I hope you'll join me in the celebration. My name is Adam with Dragonlance Saga. Until next time, Slán Javar.